When you are talking about economic growth, let's talk about the way the needs are affecting the economic growth, and then how we should strengthen it. So my position here, some resources should be utilized. Bigger resources like oil and rock like living, we should plant more trees. But something like oil and all should be utilized, and it should be used instead of waiting for third or fourth generation.
But we also need to look into the environment aspects. Why slowly
Without exhausting it, we can also development in Nagaland will be difficult. We don't really much. So if we start with oil exploration, some benefit will come to our second generation.
identification of resources, maybe existing, identification of resources.
Economic growth and development is creation of jobs. We keep taking in very few jobs are available at present, and then also we are encouraging after the job very much. Instead of doing this, some government can create some jobs, gap of getting jobs.
Domination is the some culture is the best, other cultures here I am. Assimilate
we start first mention is we need to go back. So we need to be all those issues start to be so it can be done. But I would say artificial is working she as a youth organization so well. What you can do is like how we should encourage the youth.
National Foundation for India and other organizations, CAN, ARK Foundation and the Dolen Thangjam Society to take this initiative to hold this multi-stakeholder consultation on SDGs 2030. And also for inviting me to speak on the challenges and opportunities of the Nagaland State SDG Vision. And also for inviting me to speak on the challenges and opportunities of the Nagaland State SDG Vision 2030. I also look forward with interest in hearing from my fellow panelists on this, and that's the main reason why I am here today, to hear from various stakeholders on what they think about SDGs, and that is what is going to spur this government on making policies on how to improve our performance in terms of SDG performance. As you all may be aware, I'm not going to repeat this. This is something I've been hearing since 2015, that the SDGs are a set of global 17 goals with 169 targets and 232 indicators. The main purpose that we have gathered here is that SDGs is not some kind of an alien concept that has just come up from Mars and just implanted on Earth that we have to do this, why should we do this? It is not like that. It is about the progress and development of our own society. And it is that mainstream that is very, very important from the government's point of view, that everybody imbibe that. That it is not something that the United Nations has put on everybody and then the NFI is telling everybody, come, God, this is a race, It's not a race. You have to think about a more wider, broader, developmental sense on what is SDGs. So, for achieving this SDGs, the government of Nagaland has also been working with the rest of the world. And to this end, we have formulated the Nagaland SDG Vision 2030 Living No One Behind, which was launched by our Honorable Chief Minister in August 2021, and which lays out the roadmap for the state in achieving the SDGs. And we also have priority indicators and various action plans on how we plan to achieve that. So the government of Nagaland has also set up the SDG Coordination Center under the Planning and Coordination Department formed in 2019 with technical support from the United Nations Development Program. And a major part of our work in the SDG 16, the Secretariat, is towards mainstreaming, localizing, disseminating, and integrating. But the point is that the government alone cannot by localizing SDGs, by mainstreaming SDGs, and by sensitizing the communities that we need to achieve this for achieving the progress of our society with optimal utilization of our resources, and that is what SDG is ultimately about. So this is not to say that the path forward is a very smooth road. Challenges are manifold in filling the gaps and achieving the stated developmental targets by 2030. The biggest developmental challenge I feel for the world and Nagaland is to revive and resuscitate from the ravaging effects of the COVID pandemic, because this is something, it's a surprise or a shock that happened to everybody. And I'm not very sure whether we also have completely estimated the losses that we have suffered because of the pandemic. Because that kind of economic analysis, even in an all-India level, I'm not very sure how far it has been done. So that is one thing, and we need to pay special focus to those sections of society who are disproportionately affected by the pandemic, whether it is women, children, or whether it is the small and medium traders, the enterprises, the businesses that have gone out of work and who are not able to come back because they have lost the scale. These are one important thing that I feel we should focus on, and it's a shock that happened to the system, and that is an important priority. And as far as the performance of Nagaland is concerned, Madam has already explained the SDG India Index rankings. So I would like to focus on the NER SDG 2021-22 report, because it is a more disaggregated report on district performance of Nagaland. And we as a government have done a lot of analysis on this, and we have identified certain key focus SDGs that we must focus on which we are really lagging behind. And these are SDG 1, no poverty, SDG 3, good health, SDG 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure, SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, SDG 12, sustainable consumption and production, and SDG 13, climate action. Another striking feature of Nagaland's performance in these SDG indices is the stark inter-district variations in important parameters such as health, education, access to basic facilities, and financial inclusion. Therefore, if you look at what is going to be a third challenge for Nagaland, it is going to be reducing inequalities. Because, when you talk about inequality, there is a lot of various dimensions to it. It is not just about regional inequality, it is also about gender inequality within the framework of regional inequality. It is also about class inequality, it is also about regional inequality, and addressing all forms of inequality will be very important for Nagaland to march forward and achieve our targets. So when you look at the performance, what's really happening and why are the rankings so low? So I'm just trying to reduce to the thought process that went to the government as well. Right? So why are the rankings so low? Is this just a data problem? I mean, if we start updating data a lot more frequently, are our rankings going to shoot up? But the solution is not that simple. As many of the developmental issues are, the solution is never simple. If only life was that simple, it's not like that. As an economist, I believe that, data is very important, and the analytics that you get from data, the insights that data can provide is very important because it serves as a mirror of the problems of the society. That is how I felt when I looked at the NER SDG index and Nagaland performance for the first time. Because if you look at all the indicators, it kind of gives you an indication as to what is the issue and where are the heading towards, what can be done to solve this issue. These rankings should serve as a reminder of the stark developmental deficits that are in the states and gives us a vision, a focus on how to move forward. So this is the essence of the Nagaland SDG Vision 2030. So should we move forward with a target that we improve our rankings and then we sit back and say that, okay, our rankings have improved, there is no issue. We SDG 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, SDG 12, Sustainable Consumption and Production, and SDG 13, Climate Action. So what's common in these three goals? Can someone tell me? SDG 11, 12 and 13. What is common in these three goals? It's the word sustainable, right? So even climate action is related to sustainable, right? So more than a challenge.
Thank you for the opportunity. I completely concur with what our moderator has said earlier regarding the visions that Nagaland government seems to actually sales from time to time. However, as the previous speakers also have already illustrated on various aspects of the sustainable development goals, as well as the challenges and opportunities for the state in achieving that goal, I won't dwell much on that. But my intervention here would rather be a sort of journalistic intervention, giving a brief overview about how the state of affairs has been over the years. If you recall, Nagaland was among the first state in India in 2004 to come out with a vision document called Nagaland State Human Resource Development Report. It was a very great document, and in that document there was a chapter called Nagaland Vision 2020, highlighting various development goals to be achieved by 2020 to make the state a developed state by 2020. Now, then the Chief Minister, the present Chief Minister, before he was starting his first meeting as the Chief Minister, during an NEC conference in Shillong, said that it was the developmental trust for the next decade for the state of Nagaland. How the vision works out, that is our lived experience. Again, as the state was struggling and with ways to interpret that vision, in 2016, he came out with another called Vision 2030. And in that, I quote, it said, it envisioned the developmental direction and goals of the state in detail. Among others, the vision envisaged to make Nagaland a well-governed, peaceful, inclusive, and prosperous state. Now, not to be left behind, or so to say, again, last year, as the previous speaker has mentioned, Nagaland came out with its own SDG development index, which also highlighted various short-term, long-term, and medium-term strategies to be achieved towards achieving this sustainable development goals. So, seeing all these documents that have been over the years, we can safely assert that if even 50% of these visions had turned into reality, Nagaland would have been a very developed state by now. But the reality, as I mentioned earlier, is our lived experience. So in essence, one can say that Nagaland, the state government of Nagaland, or those at the helm of affairs, are very good at living dreams, but bad realizing it, or in other words, good in theory but very poor in practical, sort of. And when we are envisioning dreams and visions time and time again, national statistics that come out periodically, comparing states or even territories, often came as a wake-up call for us. Right? So if we look at the sustainable development goals as mentioned by previous speakers, that was launched in 2018. During the best year, okay, Nagaland was in 23 among the 28 states. Next year it improves a little bit to 19. But again, in 2020 it decreases to 19. Sorry, in 2019 it was 19, and in 2020 it was 19. Now, if we look at some of the parameters that Nagaland is governing well, these are all environment-related goals, right? Which I should say we are measured in doubt with. Environment-related goals as well as social institution. But if we look at the parameters that are crucial and involved with the daily governance and have a very good impact, much impact on the life of the common people, we are lacking on that. For example, quality education, health care, giving up since economic growth and innovation infrastructure. In all this, our state seems to be in a downward spiral, I should say. But because show us that our first analysis is rightly admitted was come in terms of the ARK index that was dashboard that was launched last year. If you look at that dashboard, the best ranked district in Nagaland, Kohima, was ranked 70 among 102 districts in the Northeast. Now, except from Kohima and Dimapur, all the other districts were in the bottom 20. And most importantly, 5 of them were in the last bottom 5. So, we can sometimes question the methodology that is being adopted to measure such parameters, such indicators, but constant constant result or studies from different organizations also attest to such a situation. So, as stated earlier, Nagaland is in better position because of remarkable performance on goals associated with social distribution as well as environmental related parameters, more by natural endowment rather than any other policy intervention. Those three crucial goals are, in these three crucial goals, however, in 2020, there was a fall: sustainable consumption and production, life on land and peace, justice and strong distribution. But there was a marginal improvement on the overall score as stated. But in quality education as well as economic spheres, I mean, it don't need to mention that Nagaland is on in the lower spectrum of the development scale. So, one question that needs to be asked is how, when we, I should say the vision, SDG Vision 2020 documents, 2021 documents that the Nagaland government launched recently, it's a very comprehensive documents. We can't say it can on that or suggest give any suggestion for improvement, because it's a the best mind of the state and from outside came together to formulate the policy. But the problem is at the implementation level, and this put into question the crucial and pertinent question of governance and how these messages or how these visions are implemented at the ground level. So these are something that we can discuss during the discussion hour. One thing that I feel very pertinent to inform here is that the SDG goals for Nagaland is the implementing to nodal agency, if I'm not mistaken, is the Planning and Coordination Department. Right? Now, if we look at the present situation now, the Planning and Development Department itself doesn't have a website. I will correct it if I'm wrong, but they have a website, but it's not there now. We don't have a CC dashboard. Yeah, there's a dashboard to be there, but so far I haven't seen that. So my question is, if that is the case, how do we move forward from here? So that's the question that I want to raise here. Other discussion we can deal with during the discussion.
In the next few minutes, I will be sharing a little bit on my understanding of what it means to be transparent, accountable, and inclusive institutions. I think that is in direct response to what Ma'am just mentioned about inequality being a problem in Nagaland, and that is going to grow unless and until we address the whole concept of strong institutions. And also, like what our second panel speaker mentioned about how governance is at the core of this. Inclusive, transparent, and accountable institution is at the core, or is a subset of the Sustainable Development Goal 16. And this is crucial. I feel this is the underpinning goal for all these Sustainable Development Goals. So for us to achieve all the other goals, we need to make sure that there is peace and security, that there is protection of rule of law, and there are strong institutions in our communities. I think what is happening in the world today, the front page news, is a very clear example of why this goal is so crucial. Let me first begin by what I will not be covering. So I will not be talking about the different types of corruption that is there in Nagaland. I will not talk about where it prevails, because I feel this is an overused term. I think all of us know where corruption exists in the state of Nagaland. But what I will be addressing is what other institutions and countries around the world have done in response to corruption. What are the anti-corruption strategies that have worked? And as civil society, as young leaders, as a society, as we move forward and try to address this issue, how can we collectively frame ideas? So then, what is corruption? So the way I see corruption is, it is basically a misuse of power by powerful individuals to violate rules and take advantage of the situation. So that is corruption. And by powerful individual, it could be somebody who is powerful in their village or in their tribe, in their school, in their college. It could be political leaders. It could be heads of companies or organizations. And corruption, there is a direct negative impact on sustainable development goals. It impedes social, economic, and environmental targets. So let me just give some examples. In the social dimension, if somebody cannot pay a bribe, he or she might not have access to good education, might not get that job if he cannot pay a bribe, or might not have access to healthcare facilities. Or in the economic aspect, we see a lot of unfair processes in terms of public procurement, and that really affects medium and small sized enterprises. Or in terms of environment, when there is a lot of illegal works in the forest, getting extraction of timber or wildlife, etc., it really gives profit to certain individuals, the corrupt individuals, but it is at the expense of the environment and livelihood. Now, there are a lot of response to anti-corruption, and international organizations around the world are working a lot to kind of address corrupt activities. The hallmark of corrosive governments and communities around the world is bribery and it's corruption. But what's interesting is, about 2 years ago, the UN did a survey and they asked people around the world, what do you think about the current anti-corruption strategies that is being implemented around the world? And 68%, so that is 2 out of 3 individuals responded saying that they do not believe that the current anti-corruption strategies will work in the next 25 years. So I wonder what all of us think today, the attendees here today. Do you think that the anti-corruption strategies that we have in the state of Nagaland will work in the next 25 years? I think it's very important to kind of keep that in mind as we kind of discuss and look more and understand strong institutions. So international agencies say, like the Transparency International, that is at the forefront of working on anti-corruption, or UN agencies like Organised and or UNDP, or financial institutions. They have been promoting and talking about transparency, or transparent, accountable, and inclusive institutions. So what exactly are this, and are this vital to kind of eradicating or curbing corruption? So the way I see transparency, the way I see transparent institutions, transparency basically would mean quick information given to the public that affects public welfare. So quick information available to you and I on anything that is related to public goods. And so, for example, it would be revealing the state assets and revealing the state budget transparently, or revealing the entire background of the elected representatives who have been elected to serve us, right? Or, so these are some of the examples of being transparent. So in short, transparency is to detect the rule violations, because when you reveal all this information, detection is quicker. So transparency is a detection of rule violations. What is then accountability? Accountability is when these rule violations are detected, there is a formal process where corrections are made. So basically, when an institution is transparent, they reveal all the information, there is a formal process, and the corrupt individual is punished. That is how it should work. But unfortunately, in a lot of developing countries around the world, this whole concept of transparent, accountable institutions is not working as properly as it should. Now, transparency and accountability mechanisms are definitely working in a lot of countries. In countries where the citizens are already law-abiding, where they're already following the rules. So, for example, traffic rules. Everybody follows traffic rules. Or even getting driver's license. They legally get driver's license. So in very simple terms. Or when international organizations make any violations, there are sanctions imposed on them. So those kind of societies, transparency and accountability mechanisms work. So they call this the vertical enforcement. Yeah? So you expect the enforcement to come from up or down. So there are enforcement agencies. But maybe in places like ours or in a lot of developing countries, the anti-corruption commissions themselves are sometimes corrupt. They are involved in rule violations and there's nobody to counter them. Or what happens is the powerful individuals have impunity, so they can do whatever they want. Or elections are supposed to elect the right individual that will serve the people. But what happens in developing countries? We end up electing the corrupt individuals. And so in circumstances like this, if we strive for transparent and accountable mechanisms alone, it's not going to lead to curbing corruptions. But I'm not saying that this will not work. This has worked. But anti-corruption strategies should be very specific to a region, and it will be tried and error on our part. Sometimes an anti-corruption strategy that works for one country will be disastrous for the other. What might work for one state might not work in our state. So it's very important for us to understand the nuances as we try to develop and identify our way forward. So development practitioners and scholars and leaders of international organizations talk about this as the vertical enforcement. Yeah, and now they are recommending, together with this vertical enforcement, we need horizontal enforcement. And that is where we jump into and look at inclusive institutions. So this horizontal enforcement is basically peer-to-peer monitoring. So like I mentioned, transparency and accountability is vertical, and with peer-to-peer monitoring, basically at every level, you have people and organizations as equally as powerful as you are to monitor and make sure that you are abiding the rules. So basically, say somebody is constructing a stadium or a sports stadium or constructing a road or any public infrastructure, when the contractor or when the business individual starts the work, there is somebody as equally as powerful as that contractor monitoring the work. So that is an example of what has worked in other parts of the world. So inclusive institutions would need concerted effort. And I think all of us are very familiar with this. We have been hearing this word inclusion, inclusive a lot. So it's the concerted effort where there is equal representation of women, of socioeconomic background, of young people, of villages, of tribes coming together. There is equal access to resources, there is equal access to opportunities, and everyone has a voice. And that is us heading towards inclusion, and institutions that allow that. That is the hallmark of inclusive institutions. And as we are thinking about anti-corruption strategy, we have to look at both this vertical and horizontal enforcement. And there are three main principles that we should remember when we are kind of designing this. We need to keep in mind the power that we have. We need to remember interests, and we need to remember capabilities. Because sometimes when we are designing these anti-corruption strategies, we might think, oh, we are interested, but you might not have the power, or you might not have the capabilities. So an example would be in Bangladesh. What they did was an international organization would collaborate with a local organization that is already law-abiding. So Transparency International would collaborate with somebody at the local level that is already law-abiding, and they would give them the power and they would give them the capabilities, because those organizations already have interest. And so that is how they increase their power, their capabilities and interest, and they begin to keep track of what the other organizations are doing, and that is how they have strengthened and brought about anti-corruption strategies. So that is just one way of going about and doing it. And so I think at the end, when we are looking at inclusive institutions, it boils down to citizen engagement. And we're talking about the portal, we're talking about inequality, we're talking about engagement, and organizations, international organizations, are pushing for citizen engagement. And this is an important tool for horizontal enforcement. This is an important tool if the civil society, if anybody from a society wants to make a difference. And it is only possible if the government puts the initiative or citizen engagement, but at the same time, even us as citizens should know what this process is all about. So there are 4 stages. The first is the government or the company or the development organization, say like the World Bank or the UNDP or any organization that is doing a project, comes and informs you all, informs us, okay, this is the project that we're doing. Then they consult us. Focus group discussions, multi-stakeholder consultations, then we collaborate. And there are ways to collaborate. And then that is how we are empowered and how we can have a say. And that is the whole participatory process. I want to quickly end with 1-2 examples of what kind of citizen engagement processes are around the world. There's several, and it's very important that we know all this if we want to be actively engaged. And one is the budget literacy program, where citizens and volunteers share about how to understand budget. So many times, in fact, from World Express, we have read a lot of how they've analyzed the public expenditure, they've done CAG reviews, but we see that there are lots of gaps, but we don't know how to react. So there are citizens that share and teach on how to understand public budgeting, and it is when we'll be able to tell the government, this is where we are going wrong. And then we have the Citizens Charter. This is also another engagement process where the government actually lays down everything that you and I are entitled as a citizen of this country, as a resident of Nagaland. But what happens is everything that the government gives, it becomes mana, and we're like, we receive everything with grace. But that is what happens. But we are entitled to so many things, and it's very important that we are aware. We have things like community monitoring or community managing, where when a government or when a company or when any organization does a project, you have every right, if it is a public good, to sit down with them and discuss from the initial to the very end. And there are processes around the world where they have really included people in the decision-making process, not just bombarded by a new policy and a new legislation early one morning through a WhatsApp group, but as they are thinking about the policy, they involve us in the process. As they implement the policies, we are there. As they conduct the project till the very end, citizens are engaged. And I think that with citizen engagement, it will be one of the small ways of ensuring that there is transparency, accountability, inclusion in the state, that we will be able to address the development outcomes. If not, we are looking at a state that is going to increase in its inequality, it's going to go worse, unemployment rates is going to grow higher, and I think we're going to have a stunted economic growth. So with that, I look forward to discussing with you during the roundtable discussions. Thank you.